Today, I'm going to be exploring the lore of Edward Skeletrix in an iceberg format, starting from the things that most people know about Edward Skeletrix, going all the way down to the things that almost no one knows about Edward. We start off in the tip of the iceberg section, the things that most people know about Edward, even if they don't know Edward as an artist. Museum music. Museum music is Edward's next upcoming album, which is set to be releasing January 1st, 2025. He's been teasing this for a little bit. It seems like about since July 2024 he's been teasing it, and it is coming after Skeletrix Island Radio, a scrapped album that we will be talking about later in this list. Syckli. Syckli is Edward's brand, which he ran from 2019 to 2024. Before becoming really an artist himself, he did run Syckli, and it seems like that was his main income from this time period. And a lot of famous rappers and artists have worn Syckli, including Lil Skies, Lil Mosey, and a lot of people from that 2016 to 2018 SoundCloud scene. These are a couple of the items that Edward was most known for doing Syckli. He would always have these kind of pocket jackets showing right now, and this bag right here is one of the most popular things, and he also put a lot of these designs on other things besides just bags. It was there's a hat with this design, and all these designs were used kind of over and over, and that was kind of the initial look of Syckli. Skeletrix Island trend. The Skeletrix Island trend is a TikTok meme where Edward would mix viral videos with AI generated content with kind of a creepy, eerie feeling that fit his music. Oftentimes this would go with his song, Skeletrix Island, and it also became a meme in its own right, where it's me before I went to Skeletrix Island, just a normal person, and then me after I go to Skeletrix Island as a creepy looking person, someone kind of looking like they're homeless. Either way though, in recent months, Edward has kind of fully given up on AI, and I think most fans kind of speculate this is because the new AI models don't really fit that kind of uncanny valley aesthetic he was going for with these early videos, and AI has kind of become too good and become kind of a weird thing where it's it doesn't really fit the aesthetic he wants to go for his music. He's kind of moved on to a different thing and more invested into the music instead of the visuals going along with the music. Hubert Skeletrix. Hubert Skeletrix is a character that Edward created who is a fat, bald man, and Hubert was often used in some of Edward's older TikToks where Edward scripted that Hubert died after being shot by Edward, and Hubert has really kind of become a meme in his own right and has kind of expanded into a ton of other things where he's been posted on Twitter. He's been part of people's avatars on TikTok, they run AI avatars where they talk, and it'd be Hubert Skeletrix, and there's a guy reviewing clothes who did this. And just Hubert has kind of taken on his own life outside of Edward's creation and has kind of become his own meme outside of the Edward world as just this ah ha ha funny bald fat man. I don't know, it's just really interesting to see how Hubert is outside of his creator's reach and kind of his own thing outside of Edward. And there's also a ton of other things that Hubert has been involved in that are also later on this iceberg. Skeletrix Language. Skeletrix Language is Edward's first album he released, which was released on December 1st, 2023, and contains 10 songs that are all called typical rap song. The first couple songs actually have their own names, like Skeletrix Island 4 and Rapure Fall Winter Spring Summer 2024. Which is also going to be discussed later on this list. There's a ton of songs on there, but 10 of the songs are called typical rap song, and they're all not typical rap songs. So it is a really interesting album, and it's considered one of the best albums in the rage subgenre of rap, and has honestly had really good reception since it's come out, and has become one of the most innovative pieces in music, in underground rap music in recent memory. Skeletrix Island series. The Skeletrix Island series is a series of songs all called Skeletrix Island. Each of the songs are drumless and contain musings from Edward himself about life and how people can feel so disconnected in the digital age. These often reflect his relationship with his own mental health, and often contain musings similar to Eckhart Tolle and a lot of these philosophers that kind of want to distance themselves from their own head and try to stop thinking about things and start instead doing things. And I feel these songs most represent Edward's mental health and kind of reflect the character he is as an artist, where it's he does want to bring in bigger things than just the things he's rapping about. He doesn't want to just be an artist, he wants to also be a philosopher at the same time. ARG. This is a project that Edward created to promote one of his recent singles, Fun, and it was a digital scavenger hunt where fans would go from one YouTube video or one social media platform to the next, and there would be some clues in the description to kind of get to that next link or get to that next platform where you go on, and you just kind of have to follow from one step to the next, and then eventually at the end it told people that Fun was going to come out in just a couple of days after this was released, and this was a pretty fun thing. But fans did crack this in almost like 30 minutes. So after Edward released it, 30 minutes after, it was basically fully cracked because people just easily cracked all the codes using like a backwards code breaker. And it was really interesting to see how quickly these fans went through this, and they honestly didn't really appreciate the whole scope of the entire thing, because each of the platforms that Edward had like an account on each had their own musings and ramblings and their own like philosophies. They were each playing a different character. I feel like a lot of people didn't really understand that, so if this video does good enough, I will make a video about this ARG and the deeper meaning behind it. Skeletrix Island Radio 66.7. Skeletrix Island Radio is supposedly a scrapped album from Edward that eventually turned into a SoundCloud kind of radio station where Edward would debut new snippets to his fans. People still don't know if the album actually did get scrapped, because there are multiple posts where Edward kind of contradicts this and says that Skeletrix Island was released and it was texted to only one fan, and there's a lot of other different hints that would kind of assume, like the fans assume, that Skeletrix Island Radio was released in some form, but it now is considered a radio station in the way it's called Skeletrix Island Radio, where Edward can just debut new snippets he wants to put out. Now we move to the Above the Water section, where these are the things that some people might know about Edward if they are a fan of him. Skinny Legs. Skinny Legs was a set of extremely viral photos where Edward photoshopped his legs to be extremely skinny. This was in a lot of the photos in that early AI like era where Edward was playing with AI in a lot of other ways, and I don't really know if this is necessarily like Photoshop or AI, or I don't really know how Edward got his legs to seem so skinny, but in a lot of the earlier pics and a lot of the pics that are kind of still going around about Edward, they do have these like extremely skinny legs, and it was this like 2023 period when he was really into that. But it seems like he's really distanced himself away from that, because in my opinion, it is kind of a really weird gimmick and doesn't really reflect him as an artist as well as it should be doing. But I think the way he's kind of transitioned into bigger things now, I think that's a good look. But this is still a pretty interesting thing, and these photos still go viral almost every day. I've seen recently a bunch of these have gone viral on places like TikTok and Twitter, and I think it goes viral on like ED Twitter almost every day, because these people actually think that he is that skinny and actually has an ED. So I don't know, it's a really interesting thing, and it seems like Edward almost goes viral every day for just something random. Usuria Psychosis. Usuria Psychosis is a song from Edward where he kind of used like a Lavender Town sample beat. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's also a reference to his Instagram name, which is Usuria. I just think it's a really interesting thing where he makes a song based on his Instagram username. It's like if Drake made a song called Champagne Poppy. I don't know, it's a pretty cool thing, and it also has a really interesting sample and a really interesting music video where he uses a lot of high stock images and just has a bunch of random things going on, and has a watermark on the video which says high stock by Getty Images. I don't know, it's a really funny thing, and it just shows that Edward thinks in a different way from any other artist. Drew Phillips also eventually shouted out Usuria after it came out, saying that Edward is an artist that's going to change like how music is made, and just someone who's pushing the boundaries of art further than any other artist, which is just really cool. And Drew Phillips is kind of a cool guy in himself, and he has a really cool podcast, and he's kind of funny. Brennan Jones / One of One Kingsley. Brennan Jones and One of One Kingsley are Edward's two closest collaborators and some of his friends. Brennan is Edward's roommate and also a pretty successful rapper in his own right, with, I believe at this point, more monthly listeners than Edward, but that's just because he recently released an album and has put out a ton of music. But Kingsley is also, I believe, a close friend that has a couple songs with Edward, and Edward has put a lot of music out with him and kind of tried to promote him as much as possible, including one song where he basically just gave it to Kingsley, even though it seemed like it was kind of an Edward song featuring Kingsley called Clearly that came out, which is a really, really hard song. But I believe in both of their cases, kind of Edward encouraged them to make music, and they've kind of reciprocated back by collaborating with him a lot, and he's kind of just helped them become successful in their own rights without him. Texting. Texting is the main method of communication that Edward uses for his fans. There's like a paid Lalo number that his fans can basically text him and join a mailing list that Edward will kind of send out things when he needs to like announce a new album or announce a new song or announce a new music video. He'll put it out on Lalo, but also Lalo is like a kind of a private channel for like random people to text him, and he can specifically text back people and kind of have a conversation with them without giving up his private phone number. So it's a pretty cool way of communicating with your fans. I think it's probably like the most interesting thing that Edward has done, because he's kind of reshaped Lalo into a personal thing with his fans instead of the thing that most artists do where it's like they're promoting their tour, they're promoting a song coming out. That's when they use Lalo, but Edward uses it as kind of a personal way of connection with his fans, which is really cool. Elegant. Elegant is a 2013 XXXTENTACION grail that Edward technically produced with Grammy-nominated producer Kyle Stemberger when they were teenagers. The song was known in the XXXTENTACION community and was expected to come out in one of his documentaries, but eventually didn't before being leaked later and coming out in full, which Edward eventually reposted onto one of his SoundCloud pages where it has racked up a ton of plays. And X actually stole this beat from Edward and Kyle, which I believe they were just using it as like one of their songs as Cight, which is one of Edward's like side projects, and it was just like a song for them, but X eventually stole the beat and used it on one of his songs, and it became a grail in the XXXTENTACION community, but it was actually produced by Edward Skeletrix and Kyle Stemberger in 2013. Cight. During this time period, Edward was producing music under the name Cight, and at this time he worked with many different famous artists, including Night Lovell and of course XXXTENTACION, and just basically was collaborating with any artist he could at this point. If you read some of these interviews that Edward was participating in and like a lot of the other people were talking about, they all reference Edward as someone that would almost collaborate with anyone he could, and eventually a lot of those people did become famous in their own right, including Kyle Stemberger, Misogi, and of course Night Lovell, who I just referenced earlier. And it's just really interesting that Edward was already collaborating with a lot of these talented people, and both Edward and these people have gone on to have successful careers in their own right away from just this type of music that they were making when they were teenagers. Hubert Skeletrix sighting. This is something from the UCLA subreddit where in October there was a bunch of posters that went up at UCLA where it said Hubert Skeletrix is missing, and a lot of people posted this and then reposted it to places like Reddit, Twitter, and it kind of went viral in its own right outside of that, and it was like viral as like an Instagram meme. But the Hubert Skeletrix sighting is a post from the UCLA subreddit where it was initially posted about Hubert Skeletrix, where he's on a missing poster, and these were spread all around UCLA's campus. I believe people said there was like 50 to 100 of these spread all around campus. And I think this was just a promotional thing for his song Love You, which was coming out, I believe, a day or two after this came out. But it's just a really interesting thing, and it shows how different Edward is at promoting these things and how unique his promotion methods are compared to any other artist. Shieldless. Shieldless is a former alias that Edward used in between him making music as Cight and him making music as Edward Skeletrix, and he's believed to use this name from around 2017 to 2019, but quickly retired it. And it seems like during this time period he made very similar music to the music he was making as Cight. He tried to just quickly switch to this and I believe just become a producer at this point, but it seems like he went into making his brand Syckli at the time, just didn't have enough time to keep up with this, and then eventually just gave up on this full alias and became Edward Skeletrix. New York City interview. This is a famous interview that kind of went viral a ton of different times where Edward and Brennan Jones are interviewed in Washington Square Park in New York City, where they actually live, and they're kind of interviewed about if they like Kanye West. And there were a couple controversial things said in this interview, but one thing that kind of went the most viral was Edward got asked by the interviewer if he liked Ye and if he still listened to his music, and Edward says, yeah, I fuck with Ye. And then the interviewer is like, wow, you got such a deep voice. You have such a sexy voice. And just everyone just hated on the interviewer. And they're like, that's such a weird thing to say to another man, which is so funny. Like, I know the interviewer is kind of trolling and trying to clip farm. And clearly the clip farming did do well, because this video and the interview, I think, has gone viral so many different times. It probably has like 3 to 5 million views on that one interview, and just one of the funniest interviews because it's like a 1 minute long clip, and this has gone viral like 7 different times. Photography. Photography is kind of the new creative endeavor that Edward took in preparation for his second album, Museum Music, creating multiple different unique photos, which are all kind of up on his Instagram and have kind of become his new outlet of expression. visually, besides like the AI stuff earlier in his career. This is his new way of doing it, and he kind of makes these like weird, eerie, creepy photos where it's just like everything seems right, but there's just something off and you just can't place it in the image. That's what everything feels like. There's one where he's bald, there's one with galaxy gas, and a lot of them have been used in his recent album cover photos, in his singles Usuria, Slave People, Shop at Neiman's, and I believe Love You. So each of them have been used as a single cover, and there's also a couple other photos, but the majority of them have been used as single covers, and maybe they'll be used for the Museum Music album cover as well. Fun/Skeletrix Island Radio. This refers to the promotion of Edward's single Fun with the ARG and a lot of other stuff at this time period, where Edward was kind of teasing Skeletrix Island Radio at the same time, and often told his fans that Skeletrix Island Radio was going to be the next album coming up. And a lot of people thought this ARG and a lot of these other things were kind of preparing everyone to have an album coming out on August 18th, 2 days after Fun was released on the 16th. And a lot of people after Fun came out assumed an album was going to come out in the next 2 days, but eventually the album didn't come out, at least on streaming services. People still don't know to this day if Edward just released the album somewhere else, because there are a lot of clues that kind of show that he was going to release the album on August 18th, but he just never released it on any streaming services, and he didn't even release it on something like SoundCloud, where it's not like he'd make any money from it, but he could at least, share it to his fans. But maybe this is an album that we'll eventually hear in the future, and maybe it just got released to a couple of his close friends and someone has it and we're just all waiting on it. Purple cover. The purple cover is the new cover art for many of Edward's songs and albums, with the majority of his 2023 work changed to this cover, besides I believe Skeletrix Island Radio and a lot of the new stuff from 2024. This includes Skeletrix Language and his side project I'm a Monster, which will also be covered later in this video. It seems like Edward changed this because he wanted to kind of create this new era leading into museum music, which is a pretty cool change, but I hope he eventually does change these back to their normal cover, especially Skeletrix Language, because I really like that cover and I think it is pretty iconic in its own right. Beneath the Surface. These are the things that you'd only know if you are a pretty big Edward Skeletrix fan and have kind of looked into his lore. 808s in the Bunker, Inhale the Music. These are two different pages that are fan pages that were formerly dedicated to only post Edward's music on TikTok. When they were doing extremely well in early 24 during the Skeletrix Island trend, a lot of people on TikTok would comment on these pages saying, "We know it's you, Edward," assuming that Edward was running all of these like 10 different pages himself. We still don't know if Edward was running these pages, but I'm assuming it was either someone he knew or just someone he was related to, instead of it actually being him, because I don't know how he could run 10 pages by himself. Maybe he did run it all by himself, but it was really interesting because a lot of these pages were kind of picking up coverage of Edward when Edward wasn't really popular on his own right, and they're treating him like he was a regular artist, and they're treating him like he was a lot more popular than he actually was, which is really interesting and a really cool marketing gimmick if it was Edward himself running these pages. If not, it is just a really cool thing, and maybe it was just an extremely dedicated fan to everything Edward was doing. But it is a really cool and interesting kind of side thing that people still don't know about to this day, who is running these pages and who actually was kind of involved with making the content on the pages. Architecture EP. The Architecture EP is the most popular project that Edward put out during his time making music as Cight, which eventually did release in July 2014, and it had a feature from Night Lovell where he produced on one of the songs, and who's kind of become very famous in his own right, as discussed before. And lots of people still hold this album extremely dear to them, and it kind of gained a cult fan base in this kind of ethereal production standpoint, and it still has a lot of people that listen to these songs now and don't know Edward is now making music under a different name. So it's really interesting that Edward still has kind of cult fans for each of his different things that he's done in his life, and it's really interesting to see that people still really like this music even to this day. Mr. Edward Skeletrix. Mr. Edward Skeletrix is another TikTok Edward fan page, which has run into a very similar fashion as the aforementioned 808s in the Bunker, and it's been involved in a lot of viral memes featuring Edward in the last couple months, and it's also assumed that it's run by Edward himself because a lot of the comments say the same thing as "We know it's you, Edward," as they said for 808s in the Bunker, but It's kind of a mystery still to this day if the same person runs this account as ran the old 808s in the bunker page, and if it's just the same owner, why did they eventually switch pages, or if it's even an Edward fan page, or if it's just a whole different person being a fan of Edward. It's still kind of a mystery on who it is, but a lot of people are like mutuals in the community with this person, so I'm assuming it's not Edward and it's just some random person that's really into Edward's music and really likes his stuff. Geometry Dash. Geometry Dash refers to Edward's song Injury, which is on the Architecture EP, which eventually gained popularity as a song in the very famous Geometry Dash level Injury, which uses Edward's song as the background music. And it's just really interesting how Edward's music and kind of Edward himself has seeped into a lot of different communities through his music, and how he just kind of become viral in so many different formats. And this is kind of like really representative of that, because his song is super famous in Geometry Dash, and a lot of Geometry Dash players think this is one of the hardest levels in the entire game. Mental facility. Edward is rumored to have worked at a mental facility after graduating college, but this is still unconfirmed, but it does kind of make sense because Edward does speak about mental health a lot in his own music. It does seem like he got over a lot of mental health problems himself, and it seems like this could be kind of stemming from the fact that he worked at a mental facility and studied psychology in college, and it seems like a lot of these mental problems could be problems that other people had that he eventually just put onto himself. It's not really known at this point if this actually is a true thing, and could be just a feeling from his music where it's just like it evokes that kind of feeling, and that's why people think he worked at the mental facility, but it still kind of is an unconfirmed thing to this day. Edward's own TikTok videos. Before becoming a rapper, Edward made TikToks under the name Painters 3810721, and he gained a pretty sizable following doing these videos, and a lot of these videos have actually been re-uploaded now and honestly have like millions of views in their own right, and have kind of started their own accounts where it's like people just repost some of Edward's old TikToks and they just go viral and a lot of people watch them. It's really interesting how many different facets Edward has as a creator. He's not just an artist, he's not just a visual artist, he has so many different things that he's doing, and the TikToks was a perfect creative outlet at the time because he wasn't doing the AI stuff yet, and he was just kind of making these videos for fun, and he was also promoting his brand Syckli in its own way through these TikToks, which is just really interesting. But these TikToks honestly show a lot of like Edward's experimental like transitions and a lot of these things that he was doing in TikToks which no one had done to that point. And he kind of created this new kind of trend of TikToks where just random stuff happens, and it's like the Chris Hayne Jr. stuff is a lot kind of based off of these initial Edward Skeletrix TikToks. Texted Skeletrix Island Radio to someone. This refers to the Instagram post where he has the fun single cover, and he says in the comments, texted Skeletrix Island Radio to one fan, and people think that this is just Edward trolling them, but some people still believe that he did text Skeletrix Island Radio to someone, and we're all just waiting on Skeletrix Island Radio to eventually be leaked by that person and shown to the entire world. But it's not really assumed who this person is, and it could just be someone that's on the SMS list that never responded to his things, but now he's eventually changed it to Skeletrix Island Radio, out now on all platforms. So maybe this never happened, and maybe he never texted the album to someone because he says it's out on all platforms and it never was. So maybe he was just trolling us this entire time. Saxophone solo. The saxophone solo refers to a TikTok video of Edward's song Fun with a saxophone solo. This was first posted on the Edward Skeletrix subreddit and then got reposted onto Mr. Edward Skeletrix, where it then became kind of a viral meme in its own right, receiving over like 10 million views across the sound. And the sound also went with a pretty specific copy pasta that became also kind of popular in its own right, which we're going to discuss next. 006, that saxophone, is kind of a famous copy pasta in the comments of the saxophone solo videos, which refers to the timestamp at which the saxophone comes in on the TikTok sound, and has kind of, breathed a life of its own into that kind of meme there, because every comment in that will always be 006, that saxophone, or something along those lines, which is just really funny, where it's like the viral copy pasta is almost as big as the sound itself. Brennan Show. This refers to Brennan Jones' September 21st, 2024 concert in New York City at the Mercury Lounge, where Edward was on stage during the performance and somewhat performed Brennan's music. He kind of just lip-synced the music while Brennan was on stage actually performing it, but this is considered by Edward's fans as like the only time Edward has really ever performed himself, because he kind of got on stage and kind of lip-synced the music. And it will be really interesting to see if Edward eventually does roll out some concerts in the future, but right now this is seen as the holy grail of Edward performances. God Snippet. The God Snippet is the most popular snippet that Edward has ever released. He released it in April 2024, and whenever someone will like bring up what snippets they want to hear on the next album, or just anytime they ever say, oh, what's an Edward snippet you like? It's always God. God always comes up. It's one of the most sought after snippets, and I feel like anytime anyone ever brings it up on the Reddit or even on TikTok, it's always like just an insane positive thing where it's like everyone's like, wow, this is so great. One of the best, hardest pieces of audio I've ever heard in my life. And it's something that people really want to hear. I don't know if we're ever going to get it, because it does not seem like it's going to come out on Museum Music. If it's on Museum Music, that would be amazing, but it doesn't seem like it ever coming out. And it does seem like it could be on the Skeletrix Island radio, which eventually did get scrapped, which kind of sucks to hear. But if it is on that Skeletrix Island radio and the guy who got texted it has it, that would be insane. And it just would be insane to finally hear the full piece of the song. Twilight Zone. This is stuff that only extremely lore heavy fans of Edward would know. Skeletrix behind Trump and Biden. This is a TikTok video on the Mr. Edward Skeletrix page based on the Blade video where it says Blade's name behind Trump and Biden during the 2020 debates. There also is technically a Skeletrix one here where they make Skeletrix behind them. I'm not actually sure if this is technically real. I'm pretty sure it's not, just because it would be so hard to get Skeletrix as like the word behind people, but it is just a really funny post, and I think is like one of the funnier viral memes that has come out on the Mr. Edward Skeletrix page. Kanye West tweets fun. This refers to a set of posts that was posted by the user Cause Effect on the fun sound, and basically took this Kanye West meme, who was eventually posted by Connie Talks on Twitter, basically reposted those onto TikTok and used the sound fun there. And it is kind of like an interesting set of memes where it's like, oh, Kanye West is just such a weird guy and he always responds with like easy supply. I'll put a bunch up on screen right now, but it is kind of like a funny set of posts where it's like everyone's making up these fake texts between Ty Dolla $ign and Kanye, and they're just like them being really weird and them just saying a bunch of weird stuff, and Kanye just like being Kanye and being like this really, really weird guy. And it's kind of funny that it was like set to an Edward Skeletrix song, and these got over like 15 million views on TikTok, so they went absolutely insanely viral, and they became their own kind of meme. They're just like really funny to see Edward's music in the background of something that just had nothing to do with Edward, and just shows that Edward kind of just sneaks into a bunch of these viral memes no matter what, and just somehow will sneak into something viral on the internet. Hey, I'm outside, can you let me in? Hey, I'm outside, can you let me in is something that Edward texted to his fans initially when he started doing the texting through Laylo, and it was like kind of the initial thing to get people into using his Laylo thing and start texting him. And he basically said, hey, I'm outside, can you let me in, text me here. And this was posted on Twitter, and it was also like the first text he sent on Laylo to people, and then it kind of became a copy pasta in the community as a thing where it's like, hey, I'm outside, can you let me in, is a thing Edward says to you. Or like, what would you do if Edward was outside your house and he said, hey, I'm outside, can you let me in? It's kind of like the first viral meme in the community. Skeletrix 2024 is a set of posts from Mr. Edward Skeletrix where he voted for Edward Skeletrix in the actual presidential election, and then he posted a bunch of other posts like trying to get other people to vote for Edward in the election, and eventually resulted in over 100 people in Vermont somehow voting for Edward Skeletrix. I don't understand how this happened, but yeah, I guess he got 100 people to vote for him in Vermont, which is just an insane amount of numbers. And it was like 20 times as much as like Ken Carson, and Ken Carson was boasting about getting 4 votes, and Edward got over 100 votes. Kind of an insane thing, and just a really funny set of videos. And it just is a crazy thing that the video got like over 1 million views, and 100 people in Vermont eventually voted for Edward. Amaranth reaction. The popular streamer Amaranth, who's known for her hot tub streams, recently moved to Kick, and because Kick has really bad chat protections, her chat just would always get spammed specific phrases, and it seems like one time a fan of Edward's eventually got the entire chat. I mean, I'll put the video up right now, but the entire chat was spamming Skeletrix Island and like Edward Skeletrix and Hubert Skeletrix, and just it's insane how the entire chat was spamming that. I don't know if it was just a bunch of bots doing it or whatever it was, but it was insane seeing the entire chat do that. And then Amaranth eventually reacted to Skeletrix Island and talked about Hubert for a little bit. This was like a 5-minute clip on her Twitch stream, but it's just a really interesting thing to see that basically his fans went out there and got Amaranth to react to his thing just randomly and spammed her chat with Skeletrix Island. Hubert Skeletrix Circle Chain. This refers to another viral meme with Hubert Skeletrix, where there's a circle chain meme on TikTok where it's like, would you basically kill your best friend to get like a chain of them around? And basically Hubert Skeletrix was put on one of these chains, and it eventually became like kind of a product that people would sell. I think it became like a TikTok drop shipped item where it's like you have the Hubert Skeletrix circle chain. It also had a ton of videos where they got like hundreds of thousands of views, if not millions of views, and it kind of became its own meme where it's like, you're really going to slime out Hubert Skeletrix for the circle chain, and it's like you can buy the circle chain. I don't know, it was a really funny meme, and it eventually went viral both on Edward's Reddit and just on TikTok in general. Jack Black Minecraft movie. This refers to a fake set of posts where it basically says that Edward Skeletrix is going to replace Jack Black as the main character in the Minecraft movie. Of course, this was fake, but it was just like a really funny thing. And I think there was also a ton of other posts at the time where it's like, oh, Ken Carson or Playboy Cardi, a lot of these other big rappers are going to replace Jack Black as the main character in the Minecraft movie. So I think, you know, someone just came up and said, oh, what if Edward Skeletrix did it? And it went insanely viral on both TikTok and other platforms. So just like a pretty interesting thing, and it's like did performed well in the community. Midnight Zone. This is the stuff that only extremely experienced Edward Skeletrix fans would know. Santa Monica bans Edward Skeletrix music. This is a set of Reddit posts on the Edward Skeletrix Reddit, which basically show that Santa Monica High School District, or like school district in Santa Monica, California, banned Edward Skeletrix music for both like promoting galaxy gas and having obscene lyrics and all these other things. Which is insane that a school district would ban his music just because it's like super obscene, but maybe a lot of the people at the school and all that, like they just didn't want his music to be spread because it was, you know, relatively obscene and it was using AI or whatever. I don't know. It's a really interesting post, and I don't necessarily know if it's real or not, but it is just kind of an interesting bit of lore where he got banned from Santa Monica School District for making obscene music. Rapper Fall Winter 24, Spring Summer 24 refers to a song produced by Filthy off of the Skeletrix Language album, which also contains a sample or like an interpolation of the Playboy Cardi song Teen X, and it basically says like, we ain't Teen X, we Skeletrix. And like Edward kind of has his own riff on the Teen X sound where it's like, I'm gonna X, I'm gonna codeine. It's basically just an interpolation of that sound and kind of like an homage to Cardi and the rage sound that he has. And it is great because I feel like Edward does a good job of like making it an homage, but also making it his own thing at the same time on the album, and really making it honestly a better song than Teen X itself. Like I think Teen X is a great song, but Rapper is like the better song in my opinion. I think just Edward does a really good job of like making it an homage, but also making it his own thing and like expanding on the whole rage direction that Cardi went on Whole Lotta Red, on Skeletrix Language. And a lot of people think that Skeletrix Language is the better album compared to Whole Lotta Red, especially on platforms like Rate Your Music, where you can like compare the actual ratings of them, and Edward is a little bit higher. But either way, it is just a really interesting song, and the fact that he got Filthy, who's like one of Cardi's main producers, to produce a song on his album, especially when he was this small, and make it like an homage to Cardi, is just a really cool thing that he did. Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle is a psychologist that Edward has referenced multiple times on both social media and in some of his songs. He's also referenced Eckhart Tolle a lot of his books, and kind of just like letting go of the ego. And I think this has probably helped a lot with Edward's like actual problems with his like mental state, especially like in Skeletrix Island. It's kind of just like you have to let go of the past and just focus on the future. And I kind of see that in Edward's music, where it's like, it's not about the things he used to make, it's about the things he's making now. And that's the most important thing. I think that is kind of a way where Edward can kind of have some like philosophical musings in his music, and also like, you know, just make good music in general. And I think mixing Eckhart Tolle's like teachings into the music is just a great thing that Edward's done in a lot of his songs, and it really just shows the mental health aspect to Edward's music and how that has really taken over. And Edward does have deeper sides to just the music he's making. He's not trying to just make music, he's also trying to have like a philosophical outlook on life and like try to teach that to his fans as well. Private jet live stream. This refers to a live stream in July 2024 where Edward was on a private jet and he was live streaming with Brennan Jones. And you can also just see this is like when they're shooting the music video for Fun, where Fun ends, where Edward's right about to get on a private jet. And it seems like they did film a lot of that video and the live stream kind of at the same time. Like in the Fun music video, you can see Edward on his phone. I don't know if he's necessarily live streaming at that point, but he's still like taking photos and taking videos, and it's like kind of like one continuous thing. So it's really interesting to see like both sides of the music video. We can see the music video being actually made, and you can see the actual like music video itself and see those moments like actually turning into the music video, which is really cool. I just think it is kind of like a nice look at like who Edward actually is as a person. We can see him on the live stream. I think it's just a pretty interesting live stream, especially when you get to see the behind the scenes of making the video. Frederick Charles Dawson. Frederick Charles Dawson is a character in the Edward Skeletrix ARG who often had messages that would reference Eckhart Tolle and other philosophers in that kind of same mental health space that Edward has kind of taken up in his music. And there's kind of more of a backstory with this character, and he has like a whole life series that you can find, and it's actually on LinkedIn. He's a whole character that you can only find on LinkedIn, which is a whole crazy thing to do with the ARG. But I'm going to cover that in the ARG video, so if you want to see that, let me know, and I'll do a full backstory and deep dive on Frederick Charles Dawson. Hubert Skeletrix dead. In Edward's early TikTok videos, there are a couple that reference Edward shooting and killing Hubert Skeletrix in the video. It's just like a really funny video where it's like, oh, Edward Skeletrix is now on the run because he killed Hubert Skeletrix. And Hubert Skeletrix killers are now on the run. They're armed and dangerous. And it's really interesting that Edward was even making his own lore for both Hubert and himself in these TikTok videos, and kind of creating his own universe where he could mold whatever he wanted and kind of create the story himself, which is really interesting in these TikTok videos. And I kind of wish he still did them now, but Hubert Skeletrix also had a kind of resurgence in this death thing with this circle chain, as I mentioned before, where he's like got killed and he's on the circle chain. And also there's a time around the circle chain where Mr. Edward Skeletrix and 808s in the Bunker both posted like, Hubert Skeletrix got shot in Atlanta recently and was killed by people. And it was like the Hubert Skeletrix death has kind of come up multiple times as like a viral moment in different areas. And I think it's just a really interesting thing where Hubert Skeletrix is still dead to this day. Moa Lola. Moa Lola is one of Edward's most famous deleted songs, which we will kind of fully discuss in a minute, but also refers to Moa Lola, the fashion designer, who has collabed with Brennan Jones multiple times, and has also likely met Edward when they were in London and when Brennan Jones was hanging out with Moa Lola during that period. Moa Lola is also just a really like good song from Edward, and I think is one of the more famous ones, similar to how God is kind of always mentioned as like the most popular snippet from Edward. Moa Lola is like the most popular deleted song where everyone who likes Moa Lola just always puts it and always will spam it and like, what's Edward's best deleted song? The Abyss. This is the stuff that only the very, very most experienced Edward Skeletrix fans would know, and this is stuff that you have to go so far to find exactly what he did. Deleted songs. Deleted songs refers to the mass amounts of songs that Edward formerly had posted to both his Spotify and the SoundCloud, but eventually deleted or like removed them off those platforms, likely due to the fact that he didn't really believe those songs reflected his brand that well. And a lot of people really like these deleted songs, and some of them are their favorites. Like, of course, when you have 100 different songs and you as the artist don't like them, you can delete all of them if you want. You can try and erase them from the internet. They're not going to go away forever, especially as people do really like them and have like download them onto their own devices. But I mean, especially when Edward dropped over like 100 songs in a 1-year period, it makes sense that he wants some of those and doesn't really like isn't really proud of some of those songs. So it makes sense they deleted them, but a lot of people are like really disappointed because like when you have so many songs and he deleted probably like 2/3 of his catalog at this point, it's just kind of sad to see like some of your favorite songs getting taken off the streaming service where they were initially on. But either way, it is like a really interesting thing of an artist kind of getting rid of their catalog because they weren't proud of those songs, especially when they got rid of like 60 songs at a point. So deleting like 60 songs is just a crazy thing to do to your fans. And honestly, I respect him for it, because the fact that you're like potentially making money off those songs and taking them down because you're not artistically proud of them shows that he wants it to be more about the art than actually making money. Whole Lot of Cheese / Brennan Jones controlling. Many people on Twitter / X, whatever you want to call it, believe that Edward Skeletrix has kind of helped Whole Lot of Cheese and Brennan and has kind of been the entire marketing mastermind behind them, as they have gone extremely viral on Twitter with these like super rage bait things where it's like first crash out rapper for Whole Lot of Cheese, and then Brennan Jones will just be like white boy rapper making like Glock 40 spaz music, and people just they'll just always engage with it because it's these super rage bait type things that are paid for by Whole Lot of Cheese and Brennan, and they get posted on these pages, and then people rage bait them, and then they get like millions of views from that. Especially Whole Lot of Cheese, where she got like millions of views and Edward was on her when she had like 1,000 monthly listeners. People think that Edward is the marketing mastermind behind them, and maybe he is, but maybe he's just helping them, and maybe he's just friends with them. People really don't know if Edward is the whole marketing genius behind these things. And honestly, when going through this entire iceberg, the fact that Edward has become viral in so many different things, has been behind so many different things, I wouldn't be surprised if he is helping them somewhat, but I don't think it's just Edward doing that. And I don't think he's really like super involved in the creative processes for either of those people, but maybe he is doing the marketing for them. I'm a Monster. I'm a Monster is Edward's secret side project where he's posted 6 different songs, and he posted the first song on July 24th, just before the release of his single Fun and the supposed release of Skeletrix Island Radio. And it seems like this was kind of teasing the Skeletrix Island Radio thing, where it's like I'm coming out with songs on these, where it's like these are kind of the scrap songs from Skeletrix Island Radio, but then he eventually didn't come out with Skeletrix Island Radio, and